the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Marcus Mosier. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosier. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. You can also listen to him on the Best Coast Boys podcast. Landon, what's going on, sir?
Not much. I've taken this Cowboys training camp day off in order to follow closely a bunch of Lakers free agent news because I know that's super important to me. Really, Marcus just keeps hitting me up and asking me for Laker insider information.
Yes,
Unfortunately,
yes.
They don't just hand that out to everybody who lives in Los Angeles.
No, but you should check out our sister site, Locked On Cowboys, or Locked On Lakers, not Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Lakers, as they do a fantastic job over there. They do some great work. So, not what we're going to talk about today, Landon. We're going to talk about the Cowboys because we have a preseason game in 2 days. I'm excited. Let's get to some Twitter questions. This first one is from our guy, Mark. He wants to know what's been different so far with a Mike McCarthy camp compared to a Jason Garrett camp.
That's a good question. And this is something I talked about. I think when in pods leading up to training camp, and actually had a good conversation with a couple of the guys at training camp. Sean Kirshner, Rabble Rouser. Some of you guys may know him. He and I have been going to training camps for almost 10 years, and so we've seen a lot of Garrett training camps, and we were kind of trying to suss out. And he was asking me because he had only been through like one practice, and to me, I think the biggest difference is that there's two things. One, it seems like there are less pods, I guess is the best way to call them. There's less separated different setups in practice, and then with Garrett, he would have like 5 or 6 different periods basically. Yeah. And you'd whistle between the two and you'd sprint to the next period and do your thing. Now it seems to be like kind of just 2 or 3 of those. And there's really a lot more focus on kind of situational work. I mean, they're doing an install right now.
Would you say there's more teamwork than not teamwork, but like team sessions together than in previous years?
I think it's probably the same, but I mean number wise. But I will say that like I was kind of going was that it seems that the team stuff, even though it's still kind of in an install phase, it still seems very focused on making sure that everything has context, that everything's done situationally. So they're not just kind of like doing 11 on 11 and this is the first play we're doing and this is the second play. It's like, hey, it's the third quarter. There's 6 minutes left to go in the game. It's 3rd and 7. It's like everything has everything has context to it. Everything's situational, and I think that's interesting. And there's also a lot less one-on-ones. We haven't really seen any periods of true one-on-one periods, receivers versus DBs and offensive linemen versus defensive linemen. What we've seen is kind of 2-on-2s or like half field, kind of mock game stuff. But we haven't really seen the, especially not like when Garrett used to call out pairings to kind of challenge them in front of the team and stuff. That there's none of that, and there isn't the kind of one-on-one situation. Now it's more team-oriented, and I guess maybe in that sense there is more team stuff because the one-on-ones and that stuff has kind of been replaced by half line or half field drills that are about spacing and kind of.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I actually think it's a good thing because you don't really get that many true one-on-one situations in the NFL. No. Except you can say that you kind of do contextually, wide receivers and defensive backs, but even then you're working in conjunction with other receivers in a pattern in order to create space. So I think this kind of thing of working together and working on not only working on your route, but how your route is being run in relation to the rest of the concept, the pass concept. I think that kind of stuff has value. And and for offensive and defensive linemen, you're never going to be in a space. An offensive lineman is never going to be in a space where they are alone. You have a complete two-way go on either side of them, and there isn't an offensive line, body to at least be a barrier, right? So I think having them, work those kind of drills while all lined up and actually at least kind of somewhat simulating a play around them gives you probably more realistic looks. And maybe it's been part of the problem that we've seen certain guys let's say Malik Collins or guys who have shined at different points in training camps in the past, and it didn't really translate to regular season. Maybe it's because we've relied too much on this measuring tool that is maybe not a very good measuring tool for actually what happens in the NFL game anyways.
Yeah, I mean, we love one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. Like, that's a perfect time to evaluate players, but I'm not sure that's the best way to practice getting ready for a game, right? Maybe that's the difference, right? Like, maybe Jason Garrett used training camp a lot to figure out who's going to be on the 53-man roster, while Mike McCarthy already kind of knows, right? Like, they know probably, 49, 50 of the spots already. So let's do some things that are actually going to translate to games. I think you made a good point on one-on-ones, like especially the offensive line ones. Like, defensive linemen, edge rushers should crush it in one-on-ones. Because there's so much open space, but how much does that really translate to game action? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and an offensive line, specifically trains as a group. We're constantly talking about how the weakest link is just as important as the best player in an offensive line, because they all work as in conjunction with each other as a team, as a pass blocking concept. So this idea of going on an island, I mean, Tyron Smith probably is that guy, but you're not asking your left guard to do that on a regular basis, unless the defense has found a way to scheme that specifically open. And again, it's not that it's not completely useless, but it's also just not what 95% of your snaps in an NFL game are going to be like.
How would you compare the tempo and intensity of Mike McCarthy's practices compared to Jason Garrett's?
I did point that out, that the tempo seems less the tempo seems a little bit, you used to see, and maybe it has to do with the fact that there's less pods, right? So there's less of it. Mm-hmm. But Garrett, you see the guys he'd be yelling for everyone to sprint to the next pod or the next, the section. There's not a lot of that. I mean, guys are kind of just getting to where they need to go. But at the same time, I also feel like the practices have been a lot crisper on every level. I just think that things are the passing and the way that they're performing, everything seems a lot crisper, just a lot more efficient. It feels like, there's less stupid drops and less, mental mistakes. I mean, just kind of generally, it seems like, and it's a small sample size, and it could be team related, but I don't know if maybe, just kind of if those things are related or not, but it does seem like the tempo is slightly, down a little bit, or at least not stressed the way it was under Garrett.
I also wonder if that goes back to, them just having a lot of off-season work. Like Mike McCarthy said, they are way further ahead because of, basically everybody showing up to OTAs and mini camps. So I wonder if that factors in as well. Before we move on, did you see the Giants today were making guys run laps and stuff for mental mistakes? Including Daniel Jones, including Joe Looney, who had a bad snap. So I don't miss those practices.
It's an old school mentality type of way of doing things, but I think there's some thought to, is that actually the best way to get your team in shape mentally and physically for football?
Listen, I get it for high school kids. I get it for middle school kids. These are professionals, right? Like, hey, if a guy messes up a snap, let's not waste 20 minutes of him running around in circles. Let's get right on and get back to our work. It's different, so I just don't get it. But all right, exactly. Let's move on. Before we do that, I want to tell you guys about BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. Baseball season is in full swing, and you can track all of the action on BetOnline. Before the next pitch, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore, as this is your chance to get into the game as teams prep for their runs to the playoffs. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Landon, this next question comes from Zach. What undrafted free agent has the best shot to make the 53-man roster this year?
Well, we've seen,
feels like a weaker UDFA class than usual, right?
Well, on top of that, you have 11 draft picks, and that's the biggest it's a high number, and you already have a pretty talented team. So it's just, there's not a lot of room at the end, so to speak. So, is it Howard, the kid from Tiffin?
Yes. Hardy.
Hardy. He's looked pretty good at times. I think some of the wide receivers, Eagles at times has shown you a little bit. Who else?
What about our guy Tyler Coyle, the linebacker safety hybrid?
Yeah, it's tough, especially since they signed Hooker now. It's like there's just not a ton of room at safety either, and I haven't seen him really running with any advanced teams, more still down roster stuff. So
he's another guy we're gonna have to keep an eye on during like the Hall of Fame game, during the first the next preseason game against the Cardinals, because just haven't seen a lot of them. Nick
That's
Eubanks,
where we're gonna see a lot of these guys. Eubanks is a guy, maybe. Just because I think that they're gonna try, and Ralston is another guy that we should keep an eye on, because I think they probably will try to keep a fullback. But we'll see. For many reasons.
I don't expect this to be the best UDFA class for the exact reason you mentioned. They have 11 rookies. They signed quite a few free agents. Like, I know they didn't get like a premier free agent, but when you bring in Malik Hooker and DeMonte Casey and you bring in Keon O'Neal, there's just not a lot of spots on this roster.
And they don't look bad too. That's the other thing too. Is like, it's like they don't look like Clinton Dix or some of the other guys that we've brought in before that just like, man, these guys can't play. Like all the free agents look decent enough to make the roster. So I think like a spot like wide receiver, right? Like your top three are so solidified that there's only two other spots open, and we think Cedric Wilson and Noah Brown probably get those two. But then they have Simi Fehoko, who you drafted in the 5th round. You've got some guys you liked last year who didn't get preseason run, like Aaron Parker. It's just going to be really hard for these guys to make the roster. Next question. This one comes from Zach Pounds. When will we see Malik Hooker in pads? I actually believe he was in pads on Sunday. I don't think so.
No, he wasn't. Maybe I saw him just working out without pads.
I think he had shoulder pads on, and I think he had a helmet on, but he wasn't practicing because we noticed the same thing.
All right. So when do you expect him to practice actually?
I'm thinking after they get back from the Hall of Fame game, right?
Saturday, I believe, is their first practice against the Rams.
Yeah, so likely Saturday, I would say, because I don't think tomorrow will probably be a Cards day. I assume they're going to get some kind of prep work for Pittsburgh because they're done with their install at this point. So they'll probably be getting some looks at Pittsburgh tomorrow. It won't be padded. I don't think.
No.
So Friday when they get back, they don't practice. They practice Saturday against the Rams. So I would imagine that if he's ready to go, which I don't know that has that even been established yet, that he's completely, ready to like actually be made active in practice. But if he is, then Friday would be his first
seen him
game.
At least out there doing some drills, right?
Yeah, he looks fine, but he also hasn't been out on the courts, or anything like that. So yeah, I don't know what that means necessarily.
My guess is Saturday or Sunday, maybe.
I think so too.
They're not going to rush him. They're going to be very careful, and I wouldn't be surprised, Landon, if it's one of these things too, where he's a day on, a day off. Like that seems pretty realistic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Just simply because I think they'd also still like to get a look at a lot of these down roster guys, and they don't need to like rush him back necessarily because they know he can play. It's just a matter of him staying healthy. So don't beat him up in the preseason if you don't have to.
All right, this next one comes from Ghost of Landry. He wants to know, could Dak's injury be more serious than the Cowboys have let on? I'll answer this one. No. It's not more serious than they let on. If they had a game tomorrow, he would be playing in it. The way that I've been told how it feels, it's like you slept on your shoulder the wrong way. And trust me, when you get as old as I am, that happens. I'm sure you know, Landon, right?
You absolutely do. And it's almost like the arm is useless. Yeah, I mean, look, I actually had this conversation with someone at practice too. If it was more serious, they wouldn't be acting the way that they've been acting. They would be a lot more
letting
evasive.
him be on the field conditioning, running around, doing drills, throwing the ball left-handed.
That's that as well, obviously. They wouldn't be letting him go out and run routes. They wouldn't be letting him play defense. They also, I don't think that they would be speaking with. They would be more evasive, and they wouldn't be speaking so confidently that it certainly isn't this, it certainly isn't that. They wouldn't have Dak come out and say the same thing too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really feel like they're being pretty straightforward about this.
I think the Cowboys have to protect Dak from himself more than anything, because if you ask Dak, hey, are you good to practice tomorrow? I guarantee you the answer would be yes, right? I feel fine sharing this. Like, he was throwing 1,000 footballs a day from his scooter back in January and February, and like, he used his arm a ton. So it's not surprising that there might be a little fatigue there. So yeah, with a preseason game that he's not going to play in, no practice on Wednesday, no practice on Friday, you can kind of afford to let him sit for a week, and I feel pretty confident saying that I think he's going to be back on the field Saturday when they practice against the Rams. I feel really good about that.
And honestly, I think that this week of practice has been really good for Garrett Gilbert.
I agree. I think it's fantastic for him. Yes.
I mean, I think you've noticed a noticeable improvement in the last few practices with him. So, I think it's good for everybody. The Cowboys need to kind of figure out what's going on in their backup quarterback situation. Anyways, there's no reason to not give Dak 12 days off. Which was basically what he'll get.
Well, you started camp like 9 days before everybody else did, really?
Yeah.
Why not?
There's just no reason not to do this. You don't need to necessarily evaluate the top wide receivers in your on your roster. You know who your top three are, so there kind of is no downside to this.
We do need to evaluate if the defensive backs can catch, and that's what we have backup quarterbacks for. So, thank you to those guys.
And confirmed, by the way. Congrats, guys. Thanks for helping us out there.
Yes, we need to boost up the confidence of those guys. One more quick break to tell you guys about rockauto.com. It's a family business serving auto parts to customers online for over 20 years. They have everything from engine control modules and brake parts, motor oil, and even new carpet. Whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. The rockauto.com catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle and choose the brand, specifications, and prices that you prefer. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in the How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com today. All right, a couple more questions, Landon. This one from Cameron. How has Reggie Robinson looked during camp? Are they finally keeping him at cornerback? Yes, they are. How has he looked?
He hasn't looked great. I've seen him, getting burned a couple different times. He's working with the lower teams. I think he's with the third, and sometimes the beyond team.
Yeah.
No, I haven't really seen him very much. Well, I guess he has done some working with the second team. They rotate a lot of these guys in, but for the most part, he's working near kind of near in the bottom group with like Deontay Burton and the new kid that they signed from the Jets. So he's looked okay. I don't know what he looked like last year. He looks athletic. He looks like he's certainly not out being out athleted. I just think that he's struggling at times to kind of. I just see him getting burned a lot. I don't know what the technique issue is there, and sometimes it's tough to kind of see it, but I just see him on the tail end of some Moss type plays, and some of the plays that you see in camp, he's been the victim. I know that Malik Turner specifically has really given him fits at different times. So
my fear is that they've ruined him because of moving him back and forth so much.
And maybe he's not playing so terribly, but I think it's just looking in comparison to every other cornerback really seems to be having a great camp, and then that's really the problem for him is that it's not, maybe he's not played so horribly or anything. Maybe it's really just that I've noticed every other cornerback above him and besides him.
So he's somebody that really needs a big training camp, or excuse me, a big preseason.
Big
right?
preseason, yeah, absolutely.
So,
I mean, he's got to show up in this Hall of Fame game, I think,
yes.
To kind of get him back into the horse race a little bit. And even then, I still think it's going to be kind of an uphill battle. I mean, there still seems to be, at least in my mind, and I'm sure the coach's mind, some separation between him and I don't know. The next guy above him would be Maurice Canady.
Well, that's the thing I was about to go through, right? You have Trevon Diggs, Kelvin Joseph, Anthony Brown, Jordan Lewis, and then Nahshon Wright's a third-round pick. That's 5 corners right there.
And
our guy
well.
CJ Goodwin is going to make the team, right? So that's already 6.
Yeah.
So now you are fighting with Maurice Canady. I mean, it's going to be a tough uphill battle for him. I hope he makes some plays on special teams. Maybe he's the type of guy that you could cut and put him on your practice squad. Like, I don't know how, I don't remember how the rules are set up this year, but maybe he's somebody that you try to get on the practice squad without exposing him to other teams. I don't know, but I don't want to give up on him yet because I know he's talented, but man, they're deep at corner.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that, we hadn't really ever considered the idea that this team would have enough quality depth to kind of actually make this an issue. But I mean, here we are. So, and we'll see. I mean, obviously it's early and we don't even know that it's that quality. It just looks good now. Yeah. So preseason may tell us otherwise, and maybe it sorts this out another way by the time we've reached the last preseason game. But as it looks right now, it's just a case where, maybe he's playing okay, maybe he isn't. The real problem is that everyone above him is really showing up in a major way.
All right, this next question comes from Joshua. Who is one player you're really excited to watch on Thursday night?
Oh, man, there's so many, honestly, because I really do think that you're going to see, I kind of want to see Tyler Biadasz a little bit. I don't know why that's the first name that comes to mind. Is just I think you're going to see some of these younger offensive linemen that you kind of haven't gotten a full good look at. I want to see against some of these other guys. A lot of really, I think most of my guys are going to be offensive and defensive linemen. Maybe maybe Parsons if he plays a couple
just
snaps.
Some live action, right?
Just some live action, yeah. Because I think we see a lot of the corners and wide receivers, and there's obviously some different translation once they put pads on for sure, but not in the same way that there is between offensive linemen, defensive linemen, running backs and linebackers. The same too, right? Where there's full contact. So now we actually get to see live contact. Who's sticking out? Because there's you know as well as I do. Every year,
one or two guys.
There's one or two guys who practice terribly, and then come into one of these preseason games and light it up. I was listening to one of the shows the other day, and they brought up the name George Selvey. And I forgot that George Selvey had done it I think in the Hall of Fame game, if I'm not mistaken, a couple, 10 years ago, whatever it was, maybe longer than that. So I think, there's going to be guys like that every year. There always is. And maybe, we just talked about maybe Reggie Robinson is one of those guys, the guys that seem to really kind of just take an extra step when the lights come on. And clearly, at least the past around here, they weigh those preseason games heavily,
as they should.
And so they they have the kind of similar weight to, I don't know if they have to do this, but like it seems seemingly, a really good preseason game could erase or be significant as equal to a full week of solid practices. So it really is going to be interesting to see who really puts themselves right back into the horse race. And the other side of that is who really poorly. Gets up there and plays and their knees start shaking when the lights turn on, and who plays poorly under the lights. So maybe you get in there and Nahshon Wright doesn't look as good as he had been in all these practices, or any of these guys. That's the other thing you have to look out for is how much difference is there, and which players is they're the most difference in the way that they practice versus the way they play.
I was just thinking of some players that just had monster preseasons for the Cowboys. Wasn't one of them Tyson Thompson? Do you remember Tyson Thompson?
Yeah, absolutely. He was a third back for us for a little while too.
Yeah,
Like, that guy could fly. Remember Radaway? Was it Raymond Radaway?
Yeah. Oh yeah, Radaway got hurt though. That was the bad.
Yeah, he got hurt in one of those things. But before that, he had like 3 catches and was building on an incredible preseason. It's guys like that. It's just like, you know, that they.
This is the Jamaica Rector
practice.
Award.
They show up. Yeah, oh yeah, Jamaica Rector is another one. I mean, obviously, we've talked about Ogletree and who are the other. I mean, the wide receivers. It's always wide receivers. It seems.
Yeah, but Ogletree's a good example, right? Like Ogletree is somebody who turned some big preseason games into a nice little career, right? Like he ended up being the Cowboys' 3rd receiver one year because he played pretty well in camp and in preseason, and I will always remember that huge Week 1 game he had against the Giants. And was that 2011, 2012? One of those years, but. All right, last question. This one is specifically for you, Landon, because you are a Texas guy. Texas barbecue edition question. Are you a 2 or 3 meat platter person?
Well, I mean, it depends on the meat, but I mean,
that's the next question. What kind of meat do you go for at a barbecue?
Well, I love brisket. I mean, brisket is my favorite. Is one of my favorite things in the world. I love ribs, man. I'll eat ribs any day of the week. I mean, I'll have chicken wings. I like all kinds. It really depends on what it is, but I would say, you know, I just had barbecue over the weekend, and my take is that you go for a plate of just meat first.
Yes, I agree. That's a good call.
It's just to get your meat needs out of the way. And then you go back for a plate of sides, and then maybe some more meat on the plate of sides.
So I agree. Brisket's got to be number 1, right? And then I think I kind of like smoked turkey is one of my favorites, but ribs is really good as well.
Interesting.
What's your side of choice?
I love potato-based things, so I love really good mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
good call. Very good call.
Mac and cheese, if it's done well, is really good. I like
I'm a baked bean guy.
Some coleslaw, some potato salad. I baked beans are okay.
Okay. It's all good though. You were talking about
it's all good. I mean, if you're talking about barbecue, it's all pretty tasty.
All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back on Wednesday. We'll continue to preview this Hall of Fame game. We'll talk about practice that occurred on Tuesday afternoon. So make sure you guys are downloading the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you check out the show on YouTube. Make sure you hit that follow and subscribe button on there. You can follow Landon on Twitter at NicoleBCB. You can follow the show at Locked On Cowboys, and I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We will see you next time.